interactions. The first one was on something called Fluxetine, which is a type of SSRI. And what is SSRI? It's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Complicated words. But what does it do? It increases the amount of serotonin in the brain. What is serotonin? Simply, serotonin helps regulates the mood. It helps to regulate your mood. So these medications are commonly used to treat depression and anxiety disorder. So why was it given to Josh? Why is it important for Josh? So Fluxetine is usually a first-time treatment for major depressive disorder. This is what's commonly used nowadays. And Fluxetine can help stabilize the mood of the person so they don't short circuit. And it can also reduce the depressive symptoms someone can have. However, with every medication, there's always a side effect to it. And what are the potential issues that could have happened to Josh? Josh, we know from the facts of the game, complained about the side effects of it, like headaches and nausea. So if Josh stopped taking those medications too quickly, it could experience something we call discontinuation symptoms. Mood swings, anxiety, or full-blown hallucinations that are less common with SSRIs, but they could still happen. So knowing this, he decided to go to the next thing. He was prescribed called something Duloxetine. This is a type of SNRI. This is where we go to level 2 of psychiatric drugs. This is a serotonin. This is where I need to actually read it. Serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And what does it do? I'll explain to you simply, because that's the way I learned it as well. SNRIs will boost the serotonin. This is where we're on to the next level. But it also boosts norepinephrine levels to the brains. To the brain, we don't have multiple brains. To the brain. So what does norepinephrine does to the brain or to the person? It helps controls the alertness and the energy of this person. So SNRIs can specifically help if someone is depressed and in a depressive state. And it also accompanied by less motivation or fatigue. So if this person is depressed and they cannot do anything, they're in a cycle, guys. So Fluxetine was no longer effective and it had many side effects. The doctors in the psychiatric report we see tried the next level, Duloxetine, for broader symptom relief. So then you ask yourself, well, what does the next level of psychiatric drugs could have caused to Josh? Well, Josh reported that he stopped taking those drugs. So by stopping taking those drugs, since this is a more intense psychiatric drug, the withdrawal and the discontinuation symptoms are true psychotic hallucinations that are uncommon but are still very probable with this level 2 of psychiatric drugs. Now, guys, we get to the big stuff. Guys, pardon my English. Triptoline, which is a type of TSA. Now we're into the big boys, the TSAs, a tricyclic antidepressant. I'm not going to bore you too much, guys, with this. But the TSAs affect now directly the neurotransmitters in your brain. Primarily serotonin and our big guy, norepinephrine. But in a less selective way, guys. They also block the receptors inside your brain, which is why they often have bigger side effects like sedation, dizziness, and they are way more pronounced. So since the past 2 levels did not function or lose effectiveness, and he stopped taking them, they went to the next level. So this is where it takes your mind, guys. When older medications don't work, we have to go to the next levels. And TSAs have a high risk of severe side effects and are easier to overdose on. So, and rapidly stopping or overdosing on them can lead to, hear me out, confusion, agitation, and in rare cases, but less rare now, hallucination, especially when you combine it with extreme stress. And now we go to the last level of psychiatric drugs. Guys, this is the last line of defense. And this is when shit hits the fan. It's called Phenelazine. And this is a type of MAOI. It's called a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Very boring. But what it does is it increases the level of serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine. And it prevents their breakdown. They are typically used, guys, typically from my research, when all the other antidepressants fail, or when someone is resistant to all the other antidepressant drugs, they are given this because it has a more broad effect. So why was it given to Josh? Because it's a last resort medication. Last resort medication, guys. Simple. After SSRIs, SNRIs, TCAs fail, they probably believe that this was the last thing we could do for Josh. And then you can see that Josh's scare is now well handled, even though it's in the hand of doctors. So you can imagine that it comes with big potential issues. So if someone decides to not take those drugs anymore or mess up the dosing, you want to know what it can do to a person? Psychotic episodes, paranoia, or severe withdrawal symptoms. So now, guys, how did Josh's medications lead to the hallucination? Well, we know there was an underlying vulnerability to Josh. Josh had already severe depression, as we've seen, and was treated for it. And possibly other undiagnosed issues, like psychotic symptoms that could have been caused by those drugs. So when these treatments failed, because he was more than just depressed, doctors kept on going with the next level of medication. And we can see that there was improper management. And we can miss it, but it's very important to note that in the psychiatric notes, Josh had trouble with side effects. And it was possibly self-medicated himself, like a lot of us do when we take drugs. A lot of us do that. It's not out of the ordinary for Josh to do this. Or they decide to just change their dose. And with drugs like Phenelazine, those abrupt changes, they will cause hallucinations, paranoia, and other symptoms. And where do we see hallucinations and paranoia? Guys, do you remember when Josh was in the cave saying, "No, no, I can't see you. I can't see you." He was seeing his sister, who became a Wendigo. Can you imagine that? His sister was a Wendigo, and he believed that she was not real. So he was defenseless and harmless. So this is where the stress, the psychiatric symptoms, and the medications led to a breaking point. Stress plus medication equals breaking point. So the trauma of losing Hannah and Beth was intensified by those drugs. And the game shows that Dr. Hill, in his mind, because Dr. Hill was his doctor, but he was replaying his therapeutic sessions in his mind. He was having his own self-therapy session with his psychiatrist. So there could be a sign that he's just not having a flashback, but he's having a complete psychotic breakdown. where imagination now blends with reality. And Josh, as we've seen in the game, does not know what is real or not anymore. So in simple terms, Josh's depression was severe and he was resistant to antidepressant, kept on switching medication, went with the most severe medications, MAOIs, which cause extreme withdrawal effects, paranoia, and hallucinations, and Josh's grief and stress likely triggered and magnified those guys, leading him to see and hear things. The visions of Hannah and Beth, or I should say, only Beth, or one of them was eaten by one of the sisters. I think it was Beth who became a Wendigo. And they were not truly there. They were not. Only the Wendigo was there. And then add to that the devastating trauma, and you have a perfect recipe for a psychotic break. So in his state of distorted thinking, what might have been just a prank for him, it escalated to a delusional and a deeply delusional quest for what Josh sees as justice. He's not necessarily thinking, I want to torture my friend. He's not a villain like this. Instead, he is consumed by this belief that I need to make them experience this terror, and it's the only way to balance the scales. It's an attempt to finally force them and truly make them understand that the horror he's been living with, they have to live it as well. So for him, he thinks that this is the only path to closure. So under the grip of delusions, hallucinations, his moral judgment of what is right and wrong becomes wrapped. And he genuinely believes that scaring them is not only justifiable, but is necessary. Because he needs to correct this wrong. He needs to correct it, guys. And he's been carrying this wrong alone for way too long. So when you see Josh in the game replaying his therapy session in his mind, or seeing his sister, he thinks he's seeing his sister. It's not a theatrical flair, guys. It's a sign and proof of a fracturing psyche. It's a psyche that's been pushed beyond his limits because of an unprocessed trauma and a dangerously unstable medication regimen. And in all this mental fog, his logic warps into something completely different. A conviction that terror is the only tool he has for redemption. This is why Josh's plan, however terrifying it might be, however horrifying, makes sense to him. Because in his reality, driven by psychosis, it's the only course of action that is right. So now, does understanding psychosis excuse the terror he inflicted? It doesn't excuse it. I've never said that. That's not what I'm arguing for. Again, in a purely moral sense, it doesn't. But it fundamentally changes how we view his actions. Psychosis impairs judgment. We know this, we've shown it. It distorts perception, shatters rational thought. In a psychotic state, Josh's decision-making would be profoundly compromised. He may have genuinely, delusionally believed that his horrific game was not just justified, but necessary. His mind was bombarded by hallucinations and paranoia, and they could have convinced him that this is the only way and the only path to justice. The only way to really find a semblance of closure and finally not have those hallucinations anymore. He's not a calculated villain like we see in many of video games and movies. He's just a deeply unwell individual, guys. He was just trapped in a complete psychotic episode, acting out a reality that is broken and not real. And that psychiatric reality changes everything. So now let's put all those pieces together and address why Josh believed that his revenge was justified and what justifies his actions. The deep betrayal by his closest friends, guys, was a tragedy that began with a prank. And as it was a prank that many people believed that was supposed to be harmless. It was supposed to be funny, and it was by the very people he trusted most. Hannah, Josh's sister, of course, was singled out and humiliated. Can you imagine? She was made fun. We're talking about a woman, guys. A woman who loved Mike. And they made believe that Mike loved her too. So they pranked her. And think about it. Because of this, she fled into the winter storm. Not dressed properly, into the mountain at night with no one outside. And Beth, of course, because it's her sister, desperate to protect, followed along, and none of them came back. None of them. And they don't know why. And no legal consequences were followed. There were no arrests. No one was blamed. And in Josh's mind, everything was brushed aside.